What's up developers, and welcome back to a new video where we will dive into Laravel Breeze. Quick pause. Do you want to support the channel and want me to continue on pushing content? Well, you can support the channel on Patreon right now. You'll get benefits such as a private Discord group where everyone is helping each other out with their coding issues. If you are interested to join, the link will be in the description down below. Up until Laravel 8, we have used the Laravel UI command to pull in an authentication scaffolding in Laravel. I've got a complete video on Laravel UI and how it works, but ever since Laravel 8 came out, the developers released something which is quite similar to Laravel UI called Laravel Breeze. Laravel Breeze is an optional authentication scaffolding that you can pull in through Composer. You can obviously create your own authentication system, but why being bothered doing that if you can simply pull in a package created by the developers itself? Now Laravel UI has been deprecated and Laravel itself does not recommend you to use it anymore. Laravel Breeze, on the other hand, is a lot better to use nowadays, and in my opinion, a huge advantage is the fact that it has been built with Tailwind CSS in the front-end part. In this video, we will be setting up Laravel Breeze and we will go over the functionality and files that will be added inside your project. Besides that, we will also be enabling things like forgot password and so on. To save us some time, I've already created a complete new Laravel project where I have not added my database connection, but it does have my Mailtrap connection. Now Laravel Breeze can be installed in pretty much the same way as Laravel UI, which is through Composer. So if we open a new terminal in Visual Studio Code, and right inside of the CLI, we can simply say Composer, require a package from Laravel /Breeze, and we're also going to pull it in as a dev dependency. So let's say space /dev. Let's hit enter. Alright, as you can see, it has been published, but this command will not pull in the authentication scaffolding itself, since we need to run the breeze command to finalize it. Now let's run the PHP artisan command first. And let's scroll up to the B section, right at the top. You will see a new command right here, called breeze calling command, which will install all necessary views, routes, controllers, and other resources that are needed for Laravel Breeze. So what we can do is to perform this command by saying php artisan breeze install. Let's hit enter. Alright, you'll see that breeze scaffolding has been installed successfully. So what we need to do next is to run npm install. So let's say npm install $&npm run dev. What this command will do is building our assets, because like I said before, it is using Tailwind for the front end part. So that needs to be built as well. So let's hit enter. And this might take a second, but it will be done pretty fast. I'll cut the part out where it's installing and I'll see you back once it's done. Alright, as you can see, our assets have been compiled successfully. So what we can do right now is to open the routes folder and let's open the web.php file. And let's scroll down and let me make my terminal a little bit smaller. Usually, new routes are defined inside the web.php file. And you will see that Laravel Breeze added a new route in our file, right here, and a new require, right below it. The route of our first endpoint will be /dashpoint, and whoever has used Laravel UI before knows what the /dashboard endpoint does. But more on that later on. Now, the most important thing right here is the require, which will go to /auth.php. So that should be a route inside the same folder. Right here, you can see a new file called auth.php. So let's open it and see what's going on right here. Now inside this file, you will find a total of 14 routes that are being added inside the web.php file with this piece of code right here. So it's requiring everything that's happening over here. Now all these routes have an association with authentication. You will find the /get route to register the show page. We have the post request for the /register endpoint that has a store method, so that will basically store the user. We will have a get login, which will create the login page. We have the login post, which will store the logged in user inside a session. All those other routes right here are needed for a successful authentication scaffolding. Now inside every route, you'll see that a controller is being called right here, but they're not all the same. So let's open the app folder in the root of our directory, http, controllers, and you'll also see the route right here. So there should be an auth folder which is actually true. So let's open it. And that's mainly done because Laravel Breeze does not want to make it clustered and add all controllers inside the controllers folder. In here, you will find a total of 8 controllers where logic happens inside your application. What I want to do next is going over all these files and making them work. But before we do that, we need to make sure that we set up our database credentials, and migrate our migrations. So inside the CLI, let's perform the MySQL command. And in order to create a new database through MySQL, we simply need to say create database called Laravel_Breeze. Let's hit enter. And one row has been affected, so our database has been created. But we do need to set up our database credentials inside the .env file in the root of our application, right here. Right inside of the DB section that we have right here, you can see that our database name is Laravel Breeze, the user is root, and the password is empty. Now I only need to add a password here of Dari1234, which will do the work for me. Let's save it and let's close off this file, because we don't need to use it anymore. Now by default, Laravel applications comes with a user model and migration. Laravel Breeze does not make any changes right here. The migration file can be found inside the database folder in the root of our directory, migrations folder, and it's the first migration, the create users table. Now, it has a schema called users, so a new table. The table has a unique ID, which will be auto increment. It has a name. It has a unique email address, which is a string. It has the timestamp of when an email address has been verified. It has a string of the password. It has the remember token, and it has the default timestamps. Now, the user model, on the other hand, has to interact with this user migration once it has been migrated. The user model can be found in the models folder inside the app folder, where you will have a singular user.php model. At the beginning of this file, you will find 3 traits right at the beginning that we honestly don't need for this video, so let's skip them. Now, right below our traits, you will find a property called fillable, which is protected. And what this property does is telling our application that whenever a user wants to register an account, the name, email, and password needs to be filled in when they want to create their account. Right below our fillable property, you will find a hidden property right here, where we are telling our application that whenever we are trying to output a user to the browser, you should exclude the password and the remember token. When you want to exclude something like the name, you can just go right after the remember token and add single quotes and say name. And whenever we try to get a specific user, the name will be hidden as well. Now let's undo it because we do obviously need to show the name. But thinking about the user's migration, there isn't really something in particular that you want to hide except from the password and remember token. Now finally, you will see a property called casts right here at the bottom, which is telling our application that the email verified at should be casted to a date time. Now we're finally ready to migrate our migrations. Inside the CLI, let's first perform an exit to get out of MySQL. Then we can simply say php artisan migrate. And as you can see, all of our migrations have been migrated. It's time to move on to our controllers. I want to go over the files in a logical order. Whenever you reach a new page, you usually start off with the registration part, right? So let's open the register user controller that we have. Now let's start off with this file. The first method that you will find right here is the create method, which is a method that will simply output a view to the browser. As you can see, it's simply returning a view from the auth folder with a register.blade.php file. Let's open it. Let's scroll down, open the resources folder, views folder, the auth folder, where we have a register.blade.php file. Most views inside Laravel Breeze have been built out of a set of components. At the top, you will find the logo that is being printed out, followed with a component called auth validation errors, which will basically put out the errors that you have whenever you try to register an account. Now this component can be found inside the components folder in the views folder, so let's open it, which is the fourth one, the auth validation errors. Now there are 2 main reasons why it has been separated from the actual code. The first one is reusability. You can simply use the current component that we have open, where you validate for errors in different files. by just passing in, let me open it again, this piece of code right here. So this component can be reused inside the login page. Let me go back one more time, without using this piece of code on the login screen. If you have used Laravel UI or any other video where you need to do something with your session, this code might seem a little bit familiar to you. In order to interact with slot attributes, Laravel adds these properties at the top of your screen with the name of errors. Down below, you will find an if statement where it will loop over the errors, and if there are any errors, it will print them out in an unordered list as list items. Now let's go back to our register.blade.php file. Now before we actually move on, let's actually open this page inside the browser and see where this is coming from. Inside the CLI, let's say php artisan serve. Alright, let's open our local host and let's navigate back to the browser. We don't need our laravel.com tab, so let's paste it right here. Let's click on the register link inside the top menu. And right here, let me zoom in a little bit. We have our logo, which is coming from this piece of code right here. So the component application logo. We have a label right here with an input field, which is simply coming from inside this form, where we have a div with a label component for the name. So let's go back, which is referring to this specific name. And we have an input field with the ID of name, type is text, and it is for our name. The same thing is being done for our email address right here, for our password, and for our confirmed password, which you also can see right here. Now, once a user enters his name, email address, password, and confirmed password, it will be redirected to the, let me open the register user controller again, to the store method that we have right here. Now it's accepting the request as an argument. And the first thing that you need to do is obviously validating the request, which is being done at first. So the input fields that we have, which is the name, email, and password, will be validated right here on required string, the maximum amount of characters. The email should be an email, and it should be unique on the table users. Now the password should be unique as well. It should be confirmed, and it's calling a package called rules. This allows you to centralize the expected validation behavior for a password. Finally, once a user has passed all requirements, it will create a new user right here, but it will also hash the password from the request. The next thing that you will see is something that is quite new, which is the event that is being called right here. What this will do is sending you an email verification that your email has been registered to this platform. Now the logic behind this event will go through the providers folder right here. Let's open it. Where you will have an event service provider right here. You will find a send email verification notification class. So let's right click on it and let's go to the definition. Right inside of the handle method right here, you will see that it is checking if the current user is verified or has been verified already. If it has, it will send back an email notification right here to the user. Now let's close off this file again because we don't need it. We don't need the event service provider as well. And let's open the register user controller again. Now once a user can be registered or has verified their account, the login method will be called with the current user because they need to log in, and they will be redirected to the route service provider, home. Now, if we right click on route service provider and go to the definition, you will see that there's a constant right here called home, which will redirect you to the /dashboard endpoint. So let's say that you want to change up your dashboard endpoint and you want, let's say, a /account endpoint. You can simply change it up right here. Now let's test it out. Let's close off this file. Let's navigate back to the browser and let's create our account. Let's say that my name is Dari. My email is info@darinazar.com. And I have a very secret password that you will see in a second. Let's confirm it. Let's click on register. Alright, we have been redirected to the /dashboard endpoint, which means that it has reached this part of the code. So it has been validated, an event has been triggered, and we have been logged in. Now let's think about it. Has the event actually been triggered? We have not verified our account and we have been redirected to the /dashboard endpoint. Let's navigate back. Let's open Mailtrap and you will see that my inbox is still empty. Now I've got an integrated database inside Visual Studio Code that you will find inside my sidebar. So let's open it. Let me refresh it. And I have a Laravel Breeze database right here. Now let's open the users table. You will find one row, which is the information that we just have entered. But our email verified at is still empty. By default, Laravel Breeze turned off the email verification and wants you to add it yourself. It wants you to enable it right on the middleware from the route and adding the class inside the model. Let's navigate back to our project directory by clicking on the Explorer tab. Now let's open the web.php file right here. And it's actually very simple to enable verification. As you can see right here, the middleware method is accepting an array, but it only has one value inside of our array, which is called auth. So what we can do is to go right after auth, add a comma, and pass a second value inside our array, which has a name of verified. This should do the trick for us. There's one more thing that we need to do, and that's adding a new implementation inside our user model. So let's scroll up again, open the user model, scroll up to the class user, and right after authenticatable, add a space. We should add a new implements, space, and what it needs to implement is the must verify email contract that you will see as the first use statement right here. Let's save the file. I still have my users table open, so let's navigate there. Let's select the user that we have right here, and I don't want it, so let's click on the trash can right here. And I'm sure that I want to delete this row. Alright, we should be able to register our account again, so let's navigate to Brave, open our local host, and let's actually log out. Let's go to the /register endpoint, add a name of Dari, email of info@darinazar.com, and a very secret password. Alright, now let's click on register, and as you could see, it's asking us to verify our email address through our email inside the verify email endpoint. And you even have the option to resend a verification token. Now if we navigate back to Mailtrap, you will see that we indeed received a new email called verify email address with a button right here that we can click on to verify our account. Before we verify it, let me quickly show you where this file is coming from. If we navigate back to our controller, you will find a file inside the controllers folder called email verification prompt controller. Let's open it. In here, you will find an invoke method, and an invoke method is simply a controller in Laravel that only has one action that needs to happen. In our case, it will check if the user has verified, right here. Then it's performing a ternary operator down below. So if it is true, it will redirect the user to the /dashboard endpoint, so our route service provider : home. If it's not true, it will show the auth verify email page. In our case, we are not verified yet, so we simply need to click on the button. But before we do that once again, let's quickly dive into the verify email blade to see how that works. Let's scroll down inside our project and let's open the verify email.blade, where you have a message here where they are thanking you for signing in, which is, let me show you, this piece of code. Then it's telling us that a new verification link has been sent. It has a form with a CSRF token and a button right here, a button component with the text of resend verification email. So let's change this up to resend now, save it, and it's time to verify it. Let's navigate back. Let's refresh this page. You'll see that our button has been changed to resend now. Click on it, it's loading, and a new verification link has been sent to the email address you are provided during registration. So let's test it out. We have a new email right here. Let's verify our email address. And as you can see, we are logged in inside the dashboard where we have verified our email address. Remember in the beginning of this video, I showed you an email verification at column in our database. Let's actually see if that has been changed. Let's open our users table. Let's run it to get our new column. And right here, the email verified at has been added a minute ago. We've been over the registered user controller, the verify email controller. Now let's focus on everything that is related to login, starting off with the authenticated session controller. We have seen that once we register and verify our email, we will automatically be redirected to the dashboard. So what we can do is to log out, click on login. You will see that the user is able to log in with his email address and his password. And there's also a remember me functionality built in. There's also a functionality where you can get your password back, or you can basically reset your password, and we have a login button. Once a user enters his credentials and clicks on login, a post request will be performed inside the controller where the logic will be checked. Now let's navigate back to our code editor. And just like the register controller, there is a create method right here that simply returns the login page of our authentication scaffolding, which is this page. Now if you scroll down, you will see a public function store. Now this method accepts the login request as a parameter. Now the login request file can be found inside the request folder, the auth folder, where you have a login request.php file. Now this is a simple request file that you can create through Artisan with the make::request command. This class extends the form request, as you can see right at the top, which will basically validate incoming requests to the login endpoint. If we scroll down, you will see that it has a rules method right here, which allows you to reuse validation rules. It has a public function authorize right here, which is standard set to true. And this property checks whether a user is authorized to make a certain request or not. If we scroll down, you will find the authenticate method, which is probably one of the most important methods that we have inside of our code. If we navigate back to our authenticated session controller, you will see that inside the store function, it is the first method that's being called. Now let's see what's going on right there. Right here, you will see that it starts off by calling the ensure is not rate limited method. When creating an authentication in Laravel, you don't want the user to enter the wrong password over and over, right? You somehow need some kind of check on the number of requests that are being performed from the same IP address. That is basically what rate limiting essentially is doing. It will check the number of requests per unit time, which is defined down below, right here. This is also called throttle. Now let's right click on our ensure is not rate limited and see what's happening right there. The first thing it does is checking the number of attempts. And it's passing in two parameters right here, which is this throttle and the number of 5. Keep in mind that it has an exclamation mark right in front of it, meaning that this should not be true. The first parameter right here, so this throttle, is the number of requests that have been performed with a specific email address. The second one, so number 5, is the maximum number it can handle. Laravel sets a default of 5, and I personally find it quite a lot. Now once a user has entered their password 3 times incorrectly, the throw validation exception, right here, will be called. And what it is saying right here is that the email is unable to handle a request for 60 seconds. Let's actually test it out. Let's navigate back to Brave. Let's refresh the page. Let's add our actual email. And let's add the wrong password. So let's just enter something. Log in, that was number 1. Number 2, and one more time, which is number 3. And it will not show the exception in 3 attempts. It only shows it once you request it another time. So let's do it one more time and let's click on login. And right here, you will see that we have a ±1 minute. It took me a while, so there are only 38 seconds left before we can attempt it again. I personally think that this is low as well. I've seen sites that handle domains having a 15-minute block, but you can simply play around with it by adding a higher rate limiter. Now let's navigate back to our code editor and let's open the authenticated session controller. Right below our authenticate method, you will see that our request will be put inside the session and it has the regenerate method chained to it, which means that it will generate a new session identifier, which is needed once a user logs in again. Finally, if a user is logged in correctly, right here, it will redirect you back to the /dashboard endpoint. Now, before we test this out in the browser, let's actually add a DD right above our authenticate method with the request that we have. This allows us to see what's going on behind the scenes. Let's navigate back to Brave. Let's add our actual password. Let's click on login. Now let me actually zoom in a little bit. Right here, you will see our request. So let's open it. Let's open the parameters tab where there are 3 items inside our array. The first one is our underscore token, which is our hidden CSRF token. We have our email and we have my very secret password right here. Now there's also a session array right at the bottom, right here. Let's open it. We have our ID, we have a name, we have our attributes. So let's open it, which is the underscore token that has been set inside our request right here. We have our flash and previous, which we don't need, and a handle, which is telling us that our session will be available for 2 hours. Now let's navigate back to the code editor and let's remove our die dump. Let's save it. Let's navigate back to Brave, refresh this page, and let's continue on. And right here, we have been logged in. Now there's also a logout functionality like I've showed you before. So let's click on it. What this will do is going back to the destroy method right here. Once again, it has a request that is being passed in. It's just deleting the session token that we have. Now, if we navigate back to Brave and try to log in, you'll see a remember me checkbox right here. Let's see how that works. Inside our users table, you will find a column right here called remember underscore token. This token makes sure that users stay logged in until they manually click on the logout button. So let's navigate back to Brave. Let's try to log in. Let's say info@darwinazar.com. I have my password. Click on the remember me checkbox. Log in. Navigate back to Visual Studio Code. Let's refresh our table. And right here, you will see that the remember token has been filled. The last functionality that is available related to login is the forgot your password. Now let's log out one more time, and it's getting kind of funny right now. Click on login. Instead of logging in, let's click on forgot your password. As you can see, we've been redirected to the forgot-password endpoint, where it's asking us for an email for a reset link. This page is being called from the password reset link controller that we have. It's right here. Let's open it. It has the create method once again with the forgot-password blade. Now if we scroll down, you will find a store method where the logic of our forgot password will happen. Now inside the validate method right here, it is just validating one input field, which is the email. Down below, you'll find a new object called status, which is equal to the password facade that has a send reset link method that will send an email with a token to the email that has been entered inside the input field. Or as you can see right here, it will only send it to the email of our request. If the status has been set to true, so an email has been sent right here, it will equal return back with a status or the input field with an error, as you can see inside the ternary operator right here. Now once again, let's test it out. Let's navigate back to the browser. Let's add our password right here. Let's click on email password reset link. We have been prompted with a we have emailed your password reset link. So if we open Mailtrap, you will see a new reset password notification email, which will expire in 60 minutes. Now it has a reset password button. And once we click on this page, we will be interacting with a different controller. Let's click on it and I'll show you afterwards what will happen. Let's click on reset password. Right here, you will see that we have been redirected to the reset password endpoint, which has a token or whatever attached to it. Now let's navigate back to the code editor where you will find a new controller called new password controller. Let's open it and let's see what's going on right here. Inside the create method, you will see that it's returning a view to the reset password page where we're currently on, but it's also adding an array to the endpoint of our entire request where we are currently on. So which will basically be our underscore token and our email. Let's navigate back. So the first part right here is our token. Then we have a question mark email, which is info@darwinazar.com. This page will be handled from the store method once again, where it's validating, and I don't think that I need to explain it one more time. But let's take a moment for a status variable or object right here. It's interacting with the password facade, and it's specifically using the reset method. Now, what this method will do is attempting to reset the password of the user by the email, the password, and the password confirmation, and the token that has been passed through. If it can, which mostly is because you only need to enter a password, it will hash the password and create a new remember token of 60 characters. Now the last thing that we need to do is to navigate back to Brave and change our password. So let's add a new one. Click on reset password, and as you could see, our password has been reset. Alright, enough theory. It's time to finally move on and change up some things in Laravel Breeze. I want to start off at a basic level, and that's changing up the Laravel logo right here to my own logo. As I've said in the beginning, there is a component inside our application, inside the components folder, called application logo. This component is being used throughout our entire application, meaning that if we add our image right here, it should be changed throughout our entire authentication scaffolding. Right here, you can see an SVG, but don't worry, this does not mean that you can't use a PNG or JPEG. I want to add a PNG right here because I want to show you how simple it is since the default is an SVG. I've got my logo on my desktop, so what we can do is to store it inside the public folder. So right here, create a new folder inside our public folder called Images. Let's right click on Images and reveal it in Finder. Alright, let me go to the site. Now let's open it, and I've got my logo right here, and I want to drag it inside my Images folder. Now since we're working with a PNG and not an SVG, we don't need the code right here. So we can select it all and simply remove it. What we are going to do is to create an IMG tab with a source of Laravel blade snippets. We're going to call the asset function, which has a path of images /logo.png. Let's also add the alt of application logo, and I want to add a default width of, let's say, 100 pixels. And let me close it off with a / sign. Let's actually align this on the line below, which makes it a little bit easier. Alright, now let's save it. Let's navigate back to the browser. Let's refresh this page. The Laravel logo has been replaced with our own logo. If we go to our /register endpoint, our image has been changed on the register page because it's using the same exact component. Alright, on to the next thing. On most web pages, users have a username and an email. So let's add a username to our user model, migration, and registration screen. We need to start off by modifying our data layer, so our migration. In order to add it inside the fillable property of our model, we do need to have the column first. So I don't want to add it inside the current migration because we already have a user inside our database. So what I want to do is to create a new migration that will add one column to our users table. So let's open a new tab inside the CLI. Let's say PHP artisan, make me a new migration called add_username_to_users_table. Let's also associate it with the users table by saying /table is equal to users. Hit enter. Alright, it has been created. So let's open the last migration that we have. Inside our schema, we're simply going to create a new table with a data type of string. The column name will be in single quotes username, and right after the parentheses we're going to chain the unique method to it because our username should be unique when a user wants to log in. What we can do now is to save it inside the CLI, run php artisan migrate. As you can see, it has migrated the add username to users table. Let's open our users table, let's refresh it, and right here you will see a username column added. We can actually fill the data right here, so let's say code with Dari, and let's run it. As you can see, it has been updated. Now the real magic does not happen inside the database, but it happens inside the controller. Instead of writing new logic, we could simply modify the registered user controller. So let's go back to our code. Let's go up. Let's open the registered user controller. And we do need the store method right here. What we need to do is to make sure that we validate our username inside the validate method right here. So right after our name, let's add a new key of username. The value will be an array. Our username is required. It is a string and it has a maximum amount of characters of 255. Finally, we do need to make it unique on a specific table. So comma, unique, colon, users. Now, right after this line of code, we do need to add a comma. All right, our error is gone right now. Now down here, you will see that it's performing an eloquent query. So to create a new user, so we need to modify it here as well. Well, what we can do is to say, well, our username can be grabbed from the request username. We haven't defined it yet, but we will do it in a second. Before I actually forget it, let's open the user model. I tend to forget these small things a lot lately. And right inside our property fillable, right after the name, we need to tell our database that username needs to be filled in once a user tries to register an account. All right, what's next? Well, we do need an extra input field inside our view. So let's navigate back and let's scroll down to our register.blade.php file. And what we actually can do is duplicating the entire name block with the comment. And let's paste it right below. Let's replace the comment with username. We have a label, which is not for the name anymore, but for the username. And the value is username as well. Save it. Let's navigate back, refresh it, and you will see our username right here. It does need a little bit more margin at the top. So what we can do is to add a class to our div of empty-4. Now we have an input with a name of name. So let's replace it with username. The type is text and the name is username again. And the value is username. And before we actually test this out, let's quickly navigate back to our controller. So our register user controller. Above our validate, let's add a DD of the request. Save it. Let's navigate back to Brave. Let's refresh the page and let's create a fake account of test. The username is test. The email is test@gmail.com. It has a password. Let me quickly add it. Let's click on register. We have our DD right here with a method of post, which is all right. So let's open the request, parameters, and right here, you can see that the username has been passed through correctly with the value of test. So what we can do right now is to navigate back, remove our DD, save it, navigate back to Brave, refresh the page. And as you can see, our request has been sent right now. Let me zoom out. Let's verify it in Mailtrap. Verify our email. And we have been sent to the dashboard endpoint. Now let's test it out in the database. So let's open the users table. Let's run it again. And as you can see, our username has been filled in. Now the last step is modifying our login blades, because we currently, if we log out, log in, we're still not able to log in with our username because email is still visible right here. So let's scroll down to our view, open the login.blade.php. We have a section for our email address right here, which needs to be changed to username. The label is not for our email anymore, but for our username and the value as well. The ID of our input is username. The type is not email, but text. And the name is username. And I've almost forgot the value. So let's say username as well. Save it. Let's navigate back and refresh it. All right, it has been changed to username. We're not completely done yet, since we need to tell our login request that we're dealing with a username rather than an email. So for the last time, let's navigate back to Visual Studio Code. Let's scroll up and open our login request. And let's start off with the rules method right here, because we're returning our email and password. Now it's not email anymore, but it's username. It is required, it is a string, but it's not an email. Now, if we save it and scroll down to the authenticate method, you'll see that it's trying to attempt a authentication login with email and password. Now, password is all right, but email should be replaced with username. Copy it, Inside the validation exception, it's sending back an auth_fail with the email, which should be once again replaced with username. If we save it, and let's actually close off all files because we are almost done right here. Navigate back to Brave, log in with our second account, so test. My password is Dari1234, ! Log in. And as you can see right now, we have logged in with our username and password. This was it for this video. If you do like my content and you want to see more, leave this video a thumbs up. And if you're new to this channel, please hit the subscribe button.